Have you ever looked out at your backyard and thought, I could put a small cottage there for my parents, or maybe a little rental unit to help out with the mortgage? Well, for homeowners in Florida, that idea is suddenly a whole lot more realistic. A brand new statewide law is completely changing the game for what are called accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. So let's dive in and break down what this really means for you.
All right, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the basics. What in the world is an ADU? Then we'll get right into the new statewide law, the nuts and bolts of actually building one, how it's going to affect your finances, and finally, some really important rules and potential roadblocks you've got to watch out for.
So let's kick things off with the absolute basics. You're probably hearing this term ADU thrown around a lot more lately. But what exactly are we talking about here?
Well, the first thing to get is that an ADU isn't just one type of building. It could be a brand new standalone cottage in the back, an apartment built right over your garage, or even a part of your existing house that's been converted. The big idea is simply adding a second, smaller home onto your property.
Now here's the official legal definition. The key thing to pull from all that is that to be a true ADU, it has to be a complete independent living space. That means it's got to have its own kitchen, its own bathroom, and its own place to sleep. It's basically a self-contained little home right there on your property.
While ADU is the official lingo, you've almost certainly heard these called other things, like granny flats, in-law suites, or backyard cottages. They all point to the same concept. And look, while the idea itself isn't new, the rules for actually building one in Florida, well, they're about to get a whole lot simpler.
Okay, now for the main event. In a state that's really struggling with housing affordability, this new law is a huge deal. It's one of the biggest legislative moves we've seen, and it is set to totally transform housing options all across Florida.
This slide really captures just how big this change is. Before, whether you could build an ADU was basically a lottery depending on your zip code. It was this messy, confusing patchwork of different rules. Now, the script has been totally flipped. Local governments must allow them. That is a massive switch from a maybe to a yes.
And there's a hard deadline. By December 1st, 2026, every single city and county has to get these new rules on the books. Now, that phrase, by right, is really important. It means approval is based on clear, objective standards. No more special hearings, no more trying to persuade a neighborhood board. If your plans meet the code, you get the permit. Simple as that.
The law also just wipes away some of the biggest roadblocks from the past. For instance, cities can't force you to live on site just to rent out your ADU. They can't hit you with a bunch of extra parking requirements if you already have a driveway. And you know that old rule about only being able to rent to low-income folks? That's gone too, which opens up the rental market completely. Okay, so the law says you can build one. Awesome, but what does that actually look like in the real world? Let's walk through the actual process.
First things first, let's talk numbers. The cost and how long it takes can vary a lot, depending on what you're building. A garage conversion, that's usually your fastest and most affordable option. On the other end of the spectrum, a brand new detached cottage gives you the most privacy and rental income potential, but it's a much bigger commitment of both time and money.
You know, the path to getting one of these built is a real journey, with a few key steps. It all starts with research, just making sure your property actually qualifies. Then, you're going to need professional plans. This is not a DIY drawing situation. After you submit for permits and probably go through a round or two of revisions, then you can finally start building. And that involves multiple city inspections along the way before you get that final piece of paper, the certificate of occupancy.
Yeah, it's really important to be realistic about the timeline. This is not a weekend project. From the first time you call an architect to the day someone can actually move in, you're usually looking at somewhere between 6 and 18 months. Planning ahead is everything. All right, let's get to the part that, for many of us, is the most important, the money. We're talking about the upfront investment, the potential rental income, and the tax stuff that you absolutely cannot afford to ignore.
So let's start with the investment. You see a number like $180,000, and yeah, that might cause a little sticker shock. But it's a realistic starting point for a brand new detached ADU. This is a serious financial commitment, so you've got to approach it like any other major real estate investment.
But here's the other side of that equation. With that kind of investment, you could be looking at over $25,000 in gross rental income every single year. And in some hot markets, way more than that. I mean, this is how you can pay down your mortgage faster, fund your retirement, or just build some serious wealth.
Okay, now for the question every single Florida homeowner is asking.
what about my homestead exemption? And here's the good news. The law is crystal clear on this. Building or renting out an ADU cannot be the only reason you lose that exemption on your main house. That is a huge relief.
Now this right here is where things get really important for your wallet. How you use the ADU totally changes your tax situation. See, if it's for a family member, your tax benefits, like that amazing Save Our Homes cap, can actually extend to the new building. But, and this is a big but, if you rent it out for income, that ADU gets assessed separately at market value and is taxed like an investment property. And that means a higher tax bill.
There's also this incredibly powerful tool available just for families. If you're building an ADU for a parent or grandparent who's over 62, you might qualify for Florida's Granny Flat exemption. This can seriously reduce your property's assessed value, and that could save you thousands of dollars in taxes every single year. It's a fantastic incentive for multi-generational living.
We're almost to the finish line, but before you start digging up your backyard, we need to cover the last few crucial details: the rules around renting, and the potential roadblocks that could stop a project cold.
So, one of the biggest worries from local governments was that these new units would just turn into unregulated short-term rentals, or party houses, as the Florida League of Cities put it. They were afraid investors would swoop in, double their profits, and not actually add any long-term housing.
But the state lawmakers thought about this. The law specifically gives local governments the power to ban ADU rentals for any term that's less than 1 month. So your city can absolutely step in and say no way to using these units as Airbnbs. And finally, here is your essential pre-flight checklist. The new state law does not override your HOA's private rules, so check those first. You also have to meet all the local requirements for things like lot size and setbacks. And 2 huge Florida-specific issues: your septic system has to be big enough to handle the extra load, and if you're in a flood zone, just be prepared for much higher costs and way more rules.
So, what this all really adds up to is a brand new era of opportunity for Florida homeowners. The state has essentially handed you a key to unlock the hidden potential sitting right there in your backyard, whether it's for family, for income, or for both. The only question left is an ADU the right key for you?